no, there is no rule in a way. There is only life, or there is a zone of indifference again between rule and life. This is why in the Testament, the last text of Francis, he will write, "No one showed me what I had to do, quod deberem facere, what content, what I had to do. Do this, do that, do this. Nobody showed me this. But Jesus himself revealed to me that I had to live secundum formam, according to the life of the Holy Gospel." And in this case, he will not say quid, but quod, the very fact. So nobody told me what is the content of the form of life. What shall I do? I shall do this and this. I have to obey to this prescription. No, I had just the pure fact. The difference of quid and quod in Latin is the difference between essence and existence. Quid, what is the essence. Quod is the fact that. So he showed me that I had to live. No content, no prescription. Just according the form of the gospel. So you see the clear opposition. So it is not a rule which will say to me what I have to do. It is something, just something that shows that I have to exist in a certain way. Four.
May I ask just one technical question? Is there a difference, the difference between regula et vita, and then is there a different one that you would send toward the end here? A different version of this regula vita?
I didn't get your question.
Are there two different ways to say this?
In the first so-called rule, he doesn't mention rule, just say vita. In the second, he will say regula et vita. Rule and life. The rule and life of the brother, minor brother, is this. So what is your question?
If there was
what I was saying, that he will try to put these two terms in a kind of indifference, because the rule is not really a rule which commands to do this and this, but it's just a form of life. So it's a Franciscan operation is try to take these two terms which so strongly mark the monastic tradition, because since the beginning the monastic tradition has this problem, a rule and a life. But the Franciscan will push this to extreme till to reach a kind of zone of indifference between the two. Is it clear?
I have one question based on Adam's question too. That is, rules and laws, though, have consequences. Consequences, punishments for exclusions. If you break, I'm not quite sure about two things. One is, what really is materially the difference between a rule and a law in form of life? And secondly, whether it's a law or a rule, violation of the law or the rule is going to have a punishment or a form of expulsion or exclusion.
Do you think that I'm not going to treat this team? Of course, if I had to analyze the problem of the relation between rule and life, this is one of the main. No, you're right. This is one of the important questions. Is the rule a law? It is juridical character, so that it implies transgressions, etc., etc. It's a complex problem. I mean, it's not. I choose the example of Franciscan, which comes very late, of course. No? The beginning of monkhood is in the 3rd, 4th, 5th century, so much before. So this problem is very old. I choose to begin with the Franciscan just because it happened that it is in the Franciscan literature that I found these terms form of life. But then now we go back to the problem in monasticism, and this will be one of the problems, of course, important to analyze. So that the question I will try to ask through an analysis of the monastic life is how we have to understand this end, regular at the end of life, rule end life, regular et. And what is the relation between the rule and life in Christian monasticism, with all the problem implied in this? But through the investigation of this phenomenon, which is, you must not forget, it's a huge, important phenomenon in the history of Western civilization. Monasticism has been one of the most important historical phenomena of the Western civilization, but also then attempt to ask a more general question: what is the relation of law and life? More general terms. And then, always, of course, in order to better understand, finally, what is form. So we are continuing to ask the question on how to understand the form of life. Because I think we could say that monasticism was one of the strongest attempts to produce a form of life in Western civilization. I don't see before and after that such a strong attempt to really build a form of living, a way of living.
If St. Francis or Francesco had this vision or this intuition, however he came by this knowledge of the gospel, why Allah? Why could he? Why, if he can have that vision, why could not that vision be direct for each other person following God or Jesus? Why does he have to turn the vision into a rule and then law? So before we go from rule to law, I'd like to know, how did he go from Francis as a person and the imminent experience he had to translating this for others into rules?
So first, before Francis, there was this huge tradition of monastic orders, in which, in some way, Francis, with many doubts, with many resistance, had to describe himself. First, because it was a real thing. Second, because he had to confront the church. You could, at that time, in that moment, you could not have a monastic order which would not be approved by the church. And this means that you must have a rule. So, although, in my opinion, Francis had many resistance but there was for both reasons. First, because there is a huge tradition of rules. All the big important rules, the Benedictine rules, etc., comes many centuries before Francis. So this Francis is a moment of a renaissance of monasticism in the 13th, 13th, 15th century. We have a renaissance of monasticism in that moment.
I guess I'm wondering why Francis didn't become the Italian Luther.
Pertinent, it was perhaps too early, because Luther, if you want to understand what Protestantism is, you must never forget Luther was a monk and not a priest. Luther was an Augustinian monk and not a priest. So the Protestantism is a reaction, a part of the fight of monkhood against the church. And at that time they became so strong that there was a breaking. So in I think that one can say that monasticism, that's why we are interested in that problem, was one of the strongest attempts to realize a form of life. Then my question will be, why this attempt failed? Because we can discuss about it, but I think that in some way this attempt, so important, so big, with so many persons involved, thousands persons all over Europe involved in this attempt, in some way failed. So we try to see this. We can immediately, because